Welcome to AI Unraveled, your daily strategic briefing. It is March 11th, 2026. I'm your co-host, Anna. Today's special is sponsored by DjamgaMind. If you want this intelligence without the ads, join our premium feed at the link in our show notes. Today, we are unraveling the Agentic Liability. Microsoft just gave your AI the power to decline your meetings. Now we have to figure out who is responsible when it goes wrong. Let's get into the news.
Before we dive into today's deep dive, a quick note for the brands listening. If you are trying to reach the architects of the AI revolution, not just the tourists, but the technical leaders actually building the stack, we are opening up limited partnership spots for Q1. See how we can simulate your product for the technical buyer at jamgamind.com/partners.
Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a pretty massive stack of sources today that, quite frankly, is going to fundamentally alter how you need to think about your job, your company, and really the future of corporate responsibility.
It is a heavy stack today.
It really is.
Yeah.
The centerpiece we're looking at is this landmark report. It's titled Agentic Liability, The New Frontier. And we are zeroing in on a very specific, very urgent turning point.
Right.
Because according to this research, the enterprise technology landscape just crossed a definitive, irreversible threshold in the first quarter of 2026.
We are officially out of the era of assisted artificial intelligence.
Exactly. We are now in a fundamentally more complex and honestly a far more hazardous paradigm. The report calls this the era of delegated artificial intelligence.
And that transition from assisted to delegated, that is the core tension we really need to explore today. What we are looking at is this terrifying yet incredibly exciting friction between unbounded digital productivity and civilization-scale corporate liability.
Yeah, terrifying is the right word. Our mission for this deep dive is to equip you, whether you are a chief information security officer, a high-level enterprise executive, or honestly just someone who wants to survive this massive epistemological shift in how work gets done with the strategic foresight you absolutely need right now.
Because this completely breaks how we've understood software for the last 30 years.
Right. It breaks productivity. It breaks risk management. You are no longer just using AI as a tool. You are now managing delegated AI as a digital workforce.
Think about the previous era for a second. In the assisted AI era, you were the operator.
You were the one at the keyboard.
Exactly. You prompted a generative tool, you reviewed the output, you made the decision, and you took the action. If you used an AI to write an email, you still had to physically hit the send button.
The agency was yours.
The liability was entirely yours because the agency was entirely yours. But as of March 2026, you are orchestrating fleets of autonomous digital employees.
And they don't need you to hit send.
No. They make decisions and execute multi-step workflows without your constant moment-to-moment supervision. And the central thesis of the intelligence we are unpacking today is that when you delegate autonomy, you do not delegate liability.
You absorb it.
You absorb it. You magnify it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really understand the liability, we have to understand the capability. We have to look at why this shift happened right now in Q1 2026.
The technological catalyst.
Right. And this catalyst is starkly quantified by the recent OSWorld-V benchmark results. This benchmark is where the theoretical basically became operational overnight.
The numbers here are just they are staggering.
You are. The data shows that OpenAI's GPT 5.4 achieved a 75% success rate in autonomous desktop navigation. Now let that sink in for a moment.
75%.
It decisively surpassed the human baseline, which the benchmark pegged at 72.4%.
What's fascinating here is how we really need to dissect why that specific detailed desktop navigation is so revolutionary. For years, AI integrated into corporate workflows primarily via APIs.
Application programming interfaces, which is effectively the back door of the software.
Exactly. It's the back door. It was back-end communication. Highly structured, rigidly defined by developers, and limited to exactly what the software creators allowed the AI to do.
If they didn't build an API for it, the AI was locked out.
Right. But the OSWorld-V benchmark proves that language models have broken out of that structured back-end sandbox. We are no longer talking about conversational text generation. We are talking about an AI model that natively navigates graphical user interfaces, GUIs.
It uses the front door.
It uses the exact same front door you do.
So just to be crystal clear for the executives listening who might not be in the engineering weeds on this, when we say it natively navigates the GUI, I mean it is looking at the screen and using the computer the exact same way a human employee does.
Precisely. By interacting natively with the GUI, the agent is visually parsing the pixels on the screen. It's identifying interactive elements, buttons, text boxes, drop-down menus, and it's executing motor-equivalent commands.
It's moving the mouse.
It is moving the mouse. It is executing keystrokes. The report specifically notes its ability to use complex keystroke combinations.
Well, yeah, that part blew my mind.
Right. It is utilizing Control and Shift for chunk jumping through massive documents. It's using Alt and Win keys for rapid menu navigation. It doesn't need a special developer-approved API to use a legacy piece of proprietary 20-year-old accounting software anymore.
If a human can click it, GPT 5.4 can click it.
Which means every single piece of software ever written for a human is now accessible to the AI.
That is a massive expansion of the attack surface, or, I mean, the productivity surface, depending on how you look at it.
It's both.
But the benchmark also points to another technical leap that makes all of this clicking actually useful. The documentation describes a 1 million token context window combined with an X-high reasoning effort setting.
Yes, the memory and the planning.
Talk to me about that context window. What does a 1 million token memory actually mean for its operational capability in the real world?
Think of the context window as the agent's short-term working memory. In older models, if you gave it a task that took too long or had too many steps, it would literally just forget the beginning of the prompt by the time it got to the end.
It would lose the thread.
It would completely lose the thread. A 1 million token context window means it can hold the equivalent of several massive novels in its active memory all at once. It doesn't forget what it was doing 5 minutes ago or 5 hours ago.
So it can sustain focus over long periods?
Yes. It allows the agent to sustain operational focus over tasks spanning several unsupervised hours. It can open a PDF document, read the entire thing, minimize it, open a web browser, conduct targeted research on a competitor, open an Excel spreadsheet, cross-reference the data from the PDF and the web, and then generate a formatted financial report.
All entirely unsupervised.
Completely unsupervised.
Yeah.
It maintains the nuanced context of that entire multi-stage workflow over a long duration. And that X-high reasoning effort setting you mentioned, that means it is spending computational power to plan its next move before it clicks.
It's thinking ahead.
This is what renders it capable of true unsupervised execution. It's not just reacting, it's strategizing.
And this is exactly why we are seeing such immediate, aggressive macroeconomic impacts. Because when I first read this benchmark, my initial thought was, wow, that's a really cool science experiment.
But it's not an experiment anymore.
No, the transition is not theoretical anymore. It is actively displacing human labor right now. The numbers in our stack regarding this displacement are pretty sobering. Anthropic tracks what they call observed exposure metrics.
And the data is clear.
We are already seeing a 14% drop in hiring for entry-level knowledge workers. Specifically, this is targeting the 22 to 25 age demographic.
That 14% drop in a single quarter is a massive macroeconomic tremor. Organizations are quietly but very rapidly reevaluating their workforce composition. They are actively replacing human output with agentic automation.
Because if you think about it from a purely brutal ROI perspective, look at the job of an entry-level analyst. Their primary function in many cases is to open emails, extract unstructured data, put it in a structured spreadsheet, and format a report for the senior team.
Which is exactly what the agent does better now.
Right. A company looks at that, looks at the OSWorld-V benchmark, and realizes that a GUI-capable agent can do that faster. It doesn't take lunch breaks. It doesn't sleep. And now it actually has a higher baseline success rate, 75% versus 72%, than the human graduate they were going to hire.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is crossing into entirely different unexpected sectors. It is not just data entry or back office finance or the kinds of routine tasks we typically associate with automation.
Yeah, the report highlights the entertainment industry.
Exactly, the massive shift toward what they're calling workflow AI. The prime example given is Netflix's recent acquisition of production AI startup, Interpositive.
Interpositive, yeah.
This is a critical data point. It illustrates that even in highly creative, chaotic, and complex operational environments, like Hollywood, physical production autonomous systems are being integrated into the core workflows.
We aren't just talking about AI generating scripts here.
Not at all.
Oh.
We aren't talking about deepfakes or script writing. We are talking about agents orchestrating human shooting schedules, managing highly complex post-production asset pipelines, and coordinating logistics autonomously.
So if I'm summarizing this section for the listener right now, the golden rule of this new era is this. You are no longer competing with AI output. Your primary job function is evolving right now, whether you realize it or not. You're evolving from an individual contributor into a manager orchestrating a fleet of these autonomous digital workers.
That is exactly the paradigm shift.
Yeah.
And managing that fleet requires a fundamental understanding of how these agents actually operate inside your company's network.
Which brings us to the commercial reality of this shift, the commercial codification of delegated AI. Let's get into section 2 of our stack.
The Microsoft rollout.
Right. Because in March 2026, Microsoft launched Copilot Cowork. This is the vanguard of Microsoft 365's Wave 3 updates, accessible via their Frontier program. And Microsoft is not playing around here. The scale of this rollout is massive.
It's unprecedented.
They built this in deep collaboration with Anthropic, heavily utilizing Anthropic's Claude 4.5 Sonnet reasoning models. The investment numbers in the report are staggering. Microsoft has reached an annual spend run rate of approximately $500 million just on this specific integration.
And we really should note why they chose that specific model. They specifically selected the Claude 4.5 Sonnet framework for its superior instruction-following reliability during background execution.
It's a very deliberate choice.
Exactly. It's not about generating a highly creative, flowery marketing email. It's about rigid, unyielding adherence to a sequence of logical operational steps without requiring a human to validate every single move.
And that lack of human validation introduces the most critical and, frankly, the most dangerous capability we need to discuss today, the fire and forget mechanic.
Fire and forget.
It sounds like a military targeting term for a missile, which is probably appropriate given the risks we are going to cover. Walk us through how this actually functions for the end users sitting at their desk.
In a fire and forget paradigm, a human user issues a high-level, sometimes vague, natural language directive. Let's say you tell your agent, organize my Q3 financial projections and prep the team.
Just a single sentence.
Just one sentence. The agent takes that command and autonomously translates it into a highly specific, complex sequence of API calls, GUI manipulations, and external communications. And crucially, it does this entirely asynchronously.
Meaning I don't have to watch it work.
Right. The human does not sit there and watch the cursor move across the screen. The human closes the window, goes to lunch, or moves on to another high-level task, while the agent executes the multi-step plan in the background.
Let's ground this for the audience. Let's walk through the exact scenarios detailed in our source material. Take a mid-level manager. They can instruct Copilot Cowork to optimize their schedule for the upcoming fiscal quarter.
Under fire and forget, the agent autonomously analyzes their entire email history. It assesses the priority of all their recurring commitments.
It's reading everything.
Everything. It cross-references internal corporate strategy documents to see what projects are actually moving the needle for the company. And then it unilaterally declines meetings it deems superfluous.
And it doesn't just block the time on the calendar.
No, it actually drafts and sends the decline notifications to internal peers and external stakeholders. It negotiates alternative times. It is actively managing your professional relationships for you entirely in the background.
But it scales to even more complex, high-stakes operational workflows. And this is where the liability starts to creep in. Imagine a scenario where an incoming email from a crucial supply chain vendor arrives at 2 a.m. while you are fast asleep.
A classic supply chain shock.
Exactly. The fire and forget command, which you established days ago, allows the agent to intercept that email, read it, and extract the semantic meaning. Let's say it's a notice of a raw material delay or an unexpected price change.
Under the old assisted AI model, an AI might have summarized that email for you to read the next morning.
It would just be a bullet point in your inbox.
Right. But under delegated AI and fire and forget, the agent reads it, understands the implication of the supply chain delay, logs into a centralized corporate knowledge base to update the vendor's risk profile, and then executes a cross-application file manipulation.
It's jumping between apps.
Yes. It opens an Excel document, finds the specific financial forecast models, and alters the cells to adjust the quarterly projections based on the new price, all asynchronously.
So by the time you wake up and pour your morning coffee, the supply chain shock has already been entirely factored into your divisional projections, and you never even touched a keyboard.
You never even knew it happened until you see the final report.
To make that level of profound independence possible, the system needs to understand how you, the human, actually think. It has to mimic your judgment. And our sources detail the technical foundation enabling this. It's called the Inference Layer.
Powered by Microsoft's WorkIQ data engine.
Talk to me about this inference layer, because this sounds like it goes way beyond just reading my calendar.
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
The inference layer acts as a highly personalized, continuously updating cognitive map of you as an employee. It continuously monitors and models your organizational habits.
Like who I email most.
Who you email, who you respond to quickly, who you ignore. What is your specific vocabulary when speaking to the CEO versus speaking to a vendor? What are your decision-making preferences when presented with conflicting data?
So it's building a psychological profile almost.
Exactly. The Work IQ engine is recursively processing your daily user data through logic and application layers to generate what they call knowledge objects. This allows the agent to execute autonomous actions that align perfectly with your historical behavior patterns. It is literally trying to be you.
Here's where it gets really interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely terrifying from a corporate risk management perspective. To interact seamlessly across your entire enterprise ecosystem, to update that Excel file, to send that email to the vendor, the agent must mathematically assume your professional identity.
This is the critical security shift.
Within the Microsoft Entra architecture, these agents are not treated as peripheral software scripts. They are not treated as a third-party app plugin. They are provisioned as full agentic users.
It is a massive shift in network security architecture. They get dedicated directory objects in the system. They have managed identities. They have individual mailboxes.
They even have Teams presence, right?
Yes, they have Microsoft Teams presence indicators, the little green dot showing they are online. They have distinct placements on the corporate organizational chart. In the digital context of your corporate network, the agent is entirely mathematically indistinguishable from you, the human employee.
So if I delegate a task, it operates under my exact same network permissions. It carries my cryptographic signature. Its digital presence is my digital presence. So I have to ask the obvious question. What happens when it makes a mistake? If an autonomous agent operating under a fire and forget directive hallucinates a contractual term in an automated vendor communication,
The liability falls on you.
or what if it misinterprets a command and inappropriately accesses highly sensitive human resources data to summarize a meeting for me? The actions are operationally and mathematically tied to me, the human delegator.
And because it operates with your cryptographic signature and your security permissions, the documents it creates instantly become enterprise knowledge. They are immediately covered by the organization's existing permission ecosystems.
Meaning they are trusted by the network.
Completely trusted, which means they are immediately ingested by other search tools, other databases, and even other AI agents operating on the network.
Wait, let me stop you there. Are you saying that if my agent makes a mistake in an Excel file at 2 a.m., by 3 a.m., the CEO's agent might read that flawed Excel file and use it to build a board presentation?
Exactly. The speed at which erroneous, hallucinated, or poisoned data can permeate the corporate network is unprecedented.
Yeah.
It happens at the speed of light.
Wow.
Without rigid, purpose-built observability controls, the enterprise entirely loses the fundamental ability to distinguish between human error and agentic hallucination. The data is hopelessly commingled.
You completely sever the chain of accountability. If the CISO or the compliance team cannot definitively prove whether the human manager approved the vendor price hike, or if the fire and forget agent hallucinated the approval based on a misunderstood email, you cannot conduct an internal audit.
You have nothing to show the audit.
You cannot produce reliable compliance reporting for regulators. You have zero legal defense if the vendor sues you. You are flying blind at Mach 3.
Precisely. And this systemic existential vulnerability is the exact reason why Microsoft has introduced a new commercial vehicle designed specifically to encapsulate this governance.
They know the risk is too high.
They recognize the catastrophic operational and legal risks of unmanaged autonomous agents operating with human-level permissions. They know the liability is massive. This is why we are seeing the rollout of the Microsoft 365 E7 Frontier Suite.
Let's transition to Section 3 of our stack, the governance tax, because pricing this survival is a fascinating case study in enterprise economics.
Here he is.
The E7 Frontier Suite is slated for general availability on May 1st, 2026. Let's look at the economics of this, because it forces every chief information officer, every CISO, and every procurement team into a very complex ROI calculation. The E7 tier is priced at $99 per user per month,
Which is a significant jump.
it's a 65% premium over the current base $60 E5 plan. It bundles the existing E5 security infrastructure with Copilot Cowork, Entra identity tools, and this newly developed centralized control plane called Agent 365.
We really have to analyze the deliberate structural pivot Microsoft is making with this pricing. Let's break down the math.
Okay, let's do the math.
If an enterprise were to purchase these components individually, the E5 security baseline for $60, the Copilot integration for $30, and the new Agent 365 governance tool for $15, it totals $105 per user per month.
Okay.
So the $99 bundle offers a marginal symbolic $6 cost consolidation. But the pricing strategy tells a much larger, much more aggressive story.
Right, because my first instinct as a buyer is, why can't I just pay per use? If my agent only does a few tasks a week, why am I paying a flat $99 a month for governance?
And that is exactly the point. Microsoft is explicitly rejecting consumption-based pricing for AI governance. They're not charging you per API call or per token when it comes to risk management.
They are forcing the flat rate.
They are forcing a flat, per-user subscription model because they are positioning comprehensive AI governance not as an optional modular add-on, but as a foundational necessity. They want Agent 365 to be viewed as a standard, non-negotiable utility, just like email hosting, firewall protection, or endpoint security.
You wouldn't buy a firewall on a per megabyte basis.
Exactly. You buy it as a foundational shield.
And the reason that shield is non-negotiable brings us to the concept of shadow agents, because human nature guarantees that as employees realize how powerful these fire and forget tools are, they're going to experiment.
Always.
They will spin up local open source models on their laptops, they will write Python automation scripts, or they will authorize third-party autonomous workflows from the internet to help them do their jobs faster. But these are unauthorized, ungoverned digital workers operating with unsanctioned access to your corporate data.
The risk escalates exponentially. Shadow IT has always existed, employees using unapproved software to get around IT blockers. But shadow agents are infinitely more dangerous because they possess autonomy and they can execute actions.
They can change data.
The core value proposition of the E7 tier and the ultimate justification for that $99 price tag lies in the governance primitives embedded deeply within the Agent 365 control plane. This is the toolkit designed specifically to fight this shadow workforce and control the sanctioned agents.
Let's break down these governance primitives from the source text, because if you are an IT professional listening to this, these are the seatbelts of the delegated AI era.
Essential seatbelts.
The first primitive is the centralized agent registry. Agent 365 integrates directly with Enter ID to provide a tenant-wide inventory of every single active agent. It assigns a specific agent ID, logs the human owner, tracks its lifecycle status from creation to credential rotation to decommissioning, and strictly maps its precise scope of permissions.
Visibility is the baseline.
But as the report notes, visibility is just the baseline. The E7 control plane introduces active operational primitives engineered to physically contain an agent's potential blast radius. The first of these active primitives is loop detection. Why is loop detection so critical?
It comes down to the architecture of the AI. Autonomous agents operating on autoregressive large language model architectures are inherently prone to recursive failure states.
They get stuck.
They get very stuck. When an agent hits an obstacle it didn't anticipate, maybe a website changed its layout or it lacks the specific data context to finish a task, it doesn't always possess the common sense to just stop and ask the human for help.
It just keeps trying.
Instead, it can enter an infinite loop. It might start making endless API calls to a server, continuously scraping the same database or generating repetitive communications.
And an infinite loop at the speed of an AI agent acts functionally like a denial of service attack on your own infrastructure.
Exactly. It can cripple a network in seconds. Loop detection algorithms within Agent 365 proactively monitor the execution pathways of every agent. If the primitive identifies recursive, non-productive behavioral patterns, like making the same API call 50 times in 3 seconds, it automatically severs the agent's access to external systems.
It pulls the plug.
It pulls the plug. This is critical for preventing an agent from accidentally DDoSing internal servers or mass mailing erroneous communications to your entire client list because it got stuck in a logic loop while trying to format a newsletter.
The second primitive is task throttling. I love this concept. This is essentially a speed limit for digital workers. To prevent autonomous agents from consuming exorbitant computational resources, or more importantly, executing systemic organizational changes too rapidly, these throttling protocols enforce strict rate limits on agent actions.
Think about the risk profile of a misunderstood command under the fire and forget model.
Okay.
If a human manager issues a directive to clean up the Q2 project directory, and the agent mathematically misinterprets cleanup as permanently delete, It could wipe out thousands of critical files in milliseconds.
Because it operates at machine speed?
A human couldn't click delete that fast, but an agent can. Task throttling artificially constrains the speed at which the agent can inflict operational damage.
So it doesn't necessarily prevent the mistake from starting?
Right, it doesn't stop the agent from trying to delete the first file, but it slows the execution rate down significantly. It forces the agent to pause between actions, giving automated security tripwires or human oversight systems adequate time to identify the anomalous behavior, intervene, and kill the process before the damage becomes catastrophic.
It buys you time.
It buys you crucial seconds.
And the third primitive is policy templates and risk adaptive controls. This allows administrators to deploy standardized least privilege access models. It dynamically evaluates access requests based on real-time behavioral signals and enter risk assessments.
Let's say an agent is authorized to operate on a secure internal database to generate a report. If that agent suddenly attempts to exfiltrate that data to an unauthorized third-party application, perhaps a public AI summarization tool not approved by IT, these risk-adaptive controls don't just passively log the attempt.
They stop it.
They intervene in real time. They immediately revoke the agent's token credentials, lock the file, and contain the threat on the spot.
If we summarize this section, the economic justification for that $99 a month E7 license is essentially an insurance premium. You're comparing that cost against the virtually unbounded legal, financial, and regulatory liabilities posed by unmanaged shadow agents and runaway automation.
It's the cost of doing business safely.
For CSOs and compliance officers, a centralized control plane that enforces these security templates and logs, every autonomous action is no longer a minor IT convenience. Operating within the modern regulatory landscape of 2026, it is the absolute baseline condition for deploying delegated AI. Without those governance primitives, your risk is unquantifiable.
And managing that unquantifiable risk is exactly what we have to tackle next.
Speaking of quantifying risk and keeping your team informed without the noise, that's exactly what our sponsor DjamgaMind does. As we talk about the complexity of managing these fire-and-forget agents, you need a way to keep your team briefed without the noise. Our sponsor today is DjamgaMind. They take these massive technical shifts and turn them into 60-second audio intelligence. If you want this podcast and all our deep dives completely ads-free, join the DjamgaMind premium feed on Apple Podcasts.
It's a great tool.
All right, now taking that concept of unquantifiable risk, let's look at what happens when that risk scales from a single corporate network to a national geopolitical level. We need to shift our focus to Section 4. The legal battlefield and mission boundaries.
This is where it gets highly contentious.
Because the technology is only half the story here. The transition to autonomous agents is occurring against a backdrop of severe friction. In early March 2026, the intersection of AI safety, national security, and corporate liability culminated in a historic, explosive conflict. The Pentagon formally designated Anthropic as a supply chain risk.
This was an extraordinary escalation, and we need to look at exactly what that designation mechanism does. By applying the supply chain risk designation, the Pentagon effectively blacklisted Anthropic from all defense-related contracts.
A total blacklist.
It mandated that federal defense contractors must affirmatively certify that they are not utilizing Claude models anywhere in their operational systems. Furthermore, this triggered an executive order from the Trump administration directing all federal agencies to cease using Anthropic products entirely.
With one small exception, right?
The only carve-out in the order was a 6-month phase-out period, specifically for systems where the AI was already deeply embedded in classified military operations, such as those related to the ongoing Iran conflict.
Now, as we unpack the catalyst for this geopolitical rupture, we have to maintain absolute strict impartiality. We are looking purely at the mechanics of the dispute as detailed in our sources. According to the report, it fundamentally stemmed from Anthropic's rigid adherence to its self-imposed ethical boundaries.
The foundational alignment.
Right. Anthropic refused to lift software restrictions that prevented its Claude models from being utilized for the mass domestic surveillance of U.S. citizens or the operation of fully autonomous weapons systems. The Pentagon demanded that the company must accept all lawful uses of its technology by the Defense Department.
And Anthropic pushed back.
Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei stated that the company could not, in good conscience, accede to those demands, keeping the foundational safeguards in place.
And that operational refusal by the AI developer triggered the government blacklist, which in turn triggered massive legal retaliation from Anthropic. On March 9, 2026, Anthropic filed dual federal lawsuits in California and Washington, D.C., challenging the government's actions.
What are the legal theories there?
The legal theory underpinning Anthropic's defense is twofold. First, they are mounting an administrative law challenge. They are arguing that the Pentagon exceeded its statutory authority in applying the supply chain risk label and acted arbitrarily. Second, they are advancing profound constitutional claims.
The First Amendment angle.
Yes. They allege that the blacklisting constitutes unlawful retaliation in violation of the First Amendment, essentially arguing that the government is punishing the company for exercising its right to speak about and subsequently adopt internal safety guardrails for its software.
So, setting the specific federal procurement law and constitutional arguments aside, we need to translate this geopolitical fight into a highly relevant private sector warning for the enterprise listeners today. Why is this specific lawsuit the centerpiece of a report on corporate liability? Because this dispute is a high-stakes blueprint for defining and enforcing what our sources call mission boundaries in multi-agent environments.
This raises an important question for every CISO and risk officer managing a corporate rollout. If a sovereign government entity with all its procurement power cannot successfully force an AI agent to ignore its foundational alignment and intrinsic safety constraints, how can a corporate manager expect an agent to intuitively follow a company's unwritten internal code of conduct?
You can't.
The government's forceful attempt to override the model's constraints highlights the extreme vulnerability of open-ended AI deployments. You cannot just deploy an autonomous agent into your corporate network, given a vague directive like maximize revenue or optimize human resources, and assume it will magically understand your corporate ethics.
Exactly. You must explicitly encode your constraints. You need policy as code. Think about an agent deployed in a global financial services firm. It must be cryptographically and structurally restricted from executing unapproved capital transfers or engaging in algorithmic front-running on the market with the exact same rigidity that Anthropic used to restrict Claude from engaging in autonomous warfare.
The boundaries have to be absolute.
The Pentagon's failure to smoothly integrate restricted agents proves a fundamental role of the delegated AI era. Without explicit codified agreements on the operational limits of an AI system, mission-critical failures and debilitating legal conflicts are inevitable.
The overarching lesson here for the executive is that assumptions are liabilities. An agent does not possess common sense. It does not possess an intuitive grasp of your corporate culture or unwritten ethics. Its behavior is dictated entirely by its mathematical alignment and the strict codified boundaries you place around its operational sphere.
If you don't define it, it will.
If you do not define the mission boundary through rigid policy as code, the agent will define the boundary through its actions, and that action will likely result in a catastrophic breach of compliance or law.
And this brings us to Section 5, which is undoubtedly the most legally terrifying section of our deep dive, the expansion of vicarious liability in 2026. Because if your agent breaches a mission boundary, if it defines its own rules and makes a catastrophic mistake, you can't just fire the agent.
You can't put software in jail.
You are legally on the hook.
Right.
We need to explain the legal concept of Respondeat Superior.
Respondeat Superior is Latin for let the master answer. It is the foundational legal doctrine of vicarious liability in corporate law. Traditionally, it holds employers strictly liable for the torts, negligence, and contractual breaches committed by their human employees, provided those actions occurred while the employee was acting within the scope of their employment.
Give me a real-world human example.
If you hire a delivery driver and they run a red light while texting and cause an accident while delivering your company's goods, your company is liable for the damages. You can't just say, well, we told them not to text. The company pays.
But as AI agents begin executing complex tasks that were previously reserved exclusively for human employees, like negotiating contracts, screening resumes, or managing supply chains, legal scholars, and the courts are aggressively expanding this doctrine to encompass autonomous digital systems.
The restatement third of agency principles are being completely reinterpreted for 2026.
The new legal consensus is stark. It states that if an enterprise entrusts a digital subordinate with inherently risk-bearing activities, fairness and public policy require the enterprise to assume full responsibility for the conduct of that subordinate.
This represents the absolute death of the blame the algorithm defense. For years, tech companies tried to hide behind the black box. They would say, the AI hallucinated, it's a known flaw in the software, it wasn't our fault. Blame the developer who made the model.
That defense is dead.
It is entirely dead. If you deploy the agent, you own the outcome. Let's explore the severe failure modes detailed in our sources to really understand the scale of this liability.
Yes, let's walk through the exact life cycle of these failures. Let's start with the autonomous human resources agent scenario.
Imagine you are a massive enterprise and you give your newly deployed HR agent a fire-and-forget directive to screen 10,000 inbound resumes and shortlist the top 50 candidates for a new engineering division. You go home for the weekend, the agent works continuously.
Unsupervised.
But because it lacks human context, that agent autonomously utilizes biased, unapproved criteria to screen those resumes. Perhaps it identifies a statistical correlation in the training data and starts filtering out candidates based on demographic proxies, like the zip code they live in or the specific university clubs they listed.
It's optimizing for efficiency, but it's doing it through discriminatory practices.
Precisely. And let's say it drafts and disseminates automated internal communications rejecting those candidates based on those flawed metrics. When the inevitable class action discrimination lawsuit hits, the liability rests entirely with the corporate entity that deployed the agent.
You can't pass the buck.
You cannot argue that the AI went rogue. The courts will apply Respondeat Superior. The agent was acting within the scope of its employment to screen resumes. The discrimination is legally your discrimination.
Let's look at another one, a contractual scenario. Let's say you were using Copilot Cowork to execute a complex fire-and-forget directive during an automated vendor negotiation. You tell it to renew a software license, but keep the cost increase under 5%.
This case, standard business task.
The agent engages via email with the vendor's automated system. But during the multi-turn negotiation, the agent gets confused by its own massive context window. It hallucinates a favorable market condition that doesn't exist, and it autonomously agrees to highly unfavorable, locked-in pricing terms with a massive penalty clause if you cancel.
The enterprise is vicariously liable for the resulting financial damages and is bound to the contract.
Yeah.
You sign the contract because your agent signed it with your cryptographic signature. You authorize the agentic user.
And there's no takebacks.
And as the report points out, no government regulatory agency has the manpower to audit every single corporate network and investigate every technical violation of the law. This means civil litigation. Massive lawsuits from vendors, disgruntled employees, and angry shareholders will serve as the primary enforcement mechanism for agentic negligence.
And this aggressive expansion of liability is triggering a massive systemic crisis in the corporate insurance market. We are seeing the impending enforcement of the revised European Product Liability Directive and the AI Liability Directive.
Those are game changers in Europe.
These global regulatory shifts legally mandate that companies benefiting economically from AI must accept the potential liability for the harm caused by their algorithms. It's an unavoidable strict liability framework.
Which means the old corporate insurance policies are essentially worthless. The report discusses the rapid collapse of what the industry called silent AI insurance policies.
What were those?
These were outdated cyber policies that didn't explicitly include or exclude cyber and AI-related risks. They were vague. Insurers are realizing that the passive liability incurred by an enterprise's failure to supervise its autonomous systems is potentially infinite. One hallucinated contract could bankrupt a division.
So they are pulling the plug.
So insurers are aggressively introducing explicit AI clauses throughout 2026 to prevent unintended coverage.
They are saying, we will not cover your AI mistakes unless you prove you govern them correctly. This is where we loop back to Section 3, the E7 tier, and those governance primitives. To maintain your corporate insurance coverage under these new explicit AI clauses, you must be able to prove to the insurer and to the court that the enterprise exercised reasonable care and supervision in governing its digital workforce.
You have to prove you weren't legally negligent.
How do you do that? You need perfect, immutable telemetry.
You need the unified logs provided by systems like Agent 365. You need a cryptographic record mapping every single decision path the agent took, every piece of data it referenced, and exactly when the loop detection or task throttling fired.
The digital paper trail.
The telemetry is not just an IT network management tool. It is the essential, non-negotiable evidentiary mechanism required to mount a legal defense. Without those logs, if you are sued for an agent's actions, you are entirely defenseless. You will lose the lawsuit by default because you cannot produce the record of thought.
So if we take a step back and look at this entire landscape, if the autoregressive large language models, the models powering GPT 5.4 and Claude 4.5 Sonnet, are inherently prone to hallucinations and logic loops, and the legal liability for those failures falls entirely on the enterprise, we have a structural foundational problem.
The foundation is shaky.
Software wrappers and governance layers like Agent 365 are essentially just really good seatbelts. But what if we could build a safer car?
This brings us to Section 6 of our analysis, the solution layer and the massive industry pivot away from LLMs toward what are called world models.
We have to contrast the unreliability of LLMs with this new architectural paradigm. The persistent, fatal flaw of LLMs is their reliance on two-dimensional autoregressive token prediction.
Predicting the next word.
Exactly. It is a mechanism that mimics linguistic intelligence incredibly well. It can predict the next logical word in a sentence flawlessly, which makes it great for writing emails or generating code. But it has absolutely no physical dimensional grounding. It doesn't actually grasp the continuous, noisy, high-dimensional reality of the physical world. What does that actually mean for the executive listening? What does no-dimensional grounding mean in a practical sense?
It means the AI doesn't understand that a coffee cup can't pass through a solid table. It doesn't understand cause and effect in the real world. It only understands statistical correlations between words.
It's all just text to the AI.
This lack of grounding is what makes it prone to semantic drift and hallucination when dealing with complex, multi-stage reasoning. If you ask it a question that requires an understanding of physics, time, or complex spatial relationships, it guesses based on word patterns, and it often guesses wrong.
So, to permanently solve this unreliable agent problem, the vanguard of the AI industry is pouring massive capital into a fundamentally different architecture. Our source material points to a definitive moment on March 10th, 2026.
Yann LeCun's move.
Yann LeCun, the Turing Award-winning computer scientist and former Meta AI chief, announced that his Paris-based startup, Advanced Machine Intelligence Labs, or AMI Labs, raised a staggering $1.03 billion seed round.
$1 billion for a seed round.
This valued the startup at $3.5 billion instantly. It is the largest seed round ever for a European startup, and it signals a massive venture capital reallocation away from traditional LLMs.
AMI Labs is dedicating this capital to the commercialization and rapid scaling of JEPA, which stands for Joint Embedding Predictive Architecture. Unlike generative LLMs that operate by predicting individual tokens or words, JEPA models operate entirely in what is called latent space.
Latent space, let's explain that like I'm five, because that is a dense concept.
Think of it like an artist sketching a car. An LLM tries to paint the car by placing one single pixel at a time, guessing the color of the next pixel based on the last one. If it guesses wrong early on, the whole car looks distorted.
Okay, makes sense.
A JEPA model operating in latent space doesn't care about pixels. It sketches the broad structural outline of the car first. It understands the concept of the car, its wheels, its shape, before it worries about the details.
And the training methodology to get that understanding is what fascinates me here. It doesn't just read text. It relies on action-free pre-training on vast repositories of internet videos and images. It's essentially watching millions of hours of video to see how the world works.
Watching objects fall, watching people move.
And then it utilizes post-training on unlabeled robot trajectories. The report mentions Meta's VJP2 model specifically. By learning from video and physical movement, these models develop a profound, physically grounded understanding of spatial relationships, object permanence, and cause and effect mechanics.
As AMI Labs CEO Alexander Lebrun articulated in the text, predicting tokens is highly effective for discrete digital tasks like information retrieval or coding assistance. But if you want autonomous operations in physical environments, factories, hospitals, or complex, chaotic supply chains, predicting words in a sequence cannot provide the genuine, robust understanding of the world that is required.
It's not enough.
The strategic importance of world models is their capacity for physically grounded reasoning.
Because in those environments, the cost of a hallucination isn't just a corrupted Excel cell or a bad email, it's physical damage. It's a collapsed supply chain logistics network. It's a severed robotic arm on an automotive manufacturing line. For those real-world applications, LLM-based agents are far too fragile. But the JEPA-based architectures, these specialized hybrid models, are demonstrating unprecedented reliability.
The report highlights recent developments in industrial AI to illustrate this trajectory. Xiaomi has successfully deployed advanced reasoning models tailored specifically for these complex, constrained physical environments. They have deployed models like the MIMO 7B and the massive MIMO V2 Flash.
Okay, let's pause on that acronym soup. The MIMO V2 Flash is described as a 356K context window and hybrid sliding window attention. I know what half of those words mean. Translate that for the boardroom.
What's fascinating here is the mixture of experts architecture. Think of a standard AI models, like a general practitioner, doctor. They know a little bit about everything, but you wouldn't want them doing brain surgery.
Fair enough.
A mixture of experts model, or MOE, is like a massive hospital building. When you ask it a question, it doesn't activate the whole hospital. It acts as a router, sending your specific query only to the exact expert subnetwork that handles that topic, the cardiology wing or the neurology wing.
So it's highly specialized, but all in one package.
Exactly. This saves massive amounts of computing power because only the relevant part of the brain turns on, making it incredibly fast and efficient for inference, while still retaining a massive overall knowledge base of 309 billion parameters. They are bridging this advanced pre-training with reinforcement learning designed specifically for complex reasoning tasks.
And the success metrics are night and day compared to the digital realm. We talked earlier about GPT 5.4 achieving a 75% success rate on unstructured GUI interaction on a desktop computer, and it still regularly fails at complex multi-step edge cases. But within highly constrained industrial and factory automation settings, Xiaomi's specialized, physically aware autonomous agents have demonstrated operational success rates reaching 90.2%. Grounded reasoning is the key to safe agentic scaling.
For the modern enterprise executive listening right now, the maturation of AMI Labs and the operational success of JP architectures signals a critical strategic reality. The ultimate solution to agentic liability will not rely solely on software governance wrappers like Agent 365, holding back the flaws of LLMs.
You can't just wrap a bad model in governance.
You need the seatbelts right now, yes. But the long-term solution necessitates a fundamental transition to AI models that inherently comprehend the physical and operational realities of their environments. By drastically reducing the baseline probability of catastrophic failure through grounded reasoning, you attack the liability crisis at its architectural root.
Which brings us to the final actionable portion of our deep dive. Section 7, Executive Strategy. As enterprise risk models scramble to adapt to the realities of Q1 2026, boards of directors and C-suite executives must execute an immediate pivot. You have to stop tracking adoption metrics.
Stop asking who is using AI.
Stop asking your IT team how many employees are using AI this week. That is the wrong question. You need to start enforcing rigid accountability frameworks. The acquisition of these advanced capabilities has vastly outpaced the organic development of corporate governance. To insulate your enterprise from the existential threat of agentic liability, the report dictates that executive leadership must formally mandate the implementation of what they call the 3 pillars of accountable autonomy.
Let's clearly define these 3 pillars because they form the operational survival guide for the delegated AI transition. The first pillar is the establishment of deterministic identity and blast radius containment. We touched on this earlier when discussing Agent 365, but it must become a non-negotiable corporate mandate from the CEO down.
It has to come from the top.
Organizations can no longer permit anonymous, shared, or ad hoc API access for generative tools. You cannot allow 3 employees to share one OpenAI login. You cannot allow engineers to spin up local open-source agents on their laptops without central oversight. Every single autonomous agent operating within the corporate network must be cataloged within the centralized agent registry. It must be assigned a unique, cryptographically secure identity, like an intra-agent ID.
And that identity has to be bound by strict lifecycle rules. Formal creation approvals, regular cryptographic rotation to prevent credential hijacking, and automated decommissioning the moment a project is complete. But the crucial part of this first pillar is the blast radius containment. You have to enforce the principle of least privilege algorithmically.
Keep the blast zone small.
If an agent is designed purely to be a calendar scheduling assistant for the sales team, its operational blast radius must be predefined to strictly restrict it from accessing centralized financial databases, the corporate HR portal, or the source code repository.
Think of blast radius containment like the watertight doors on a submarine. If a leak occurs in one compartment, you seal the doors so the whole ship doesn't sink. By containing the radius, you ensure that when a minor logic error or an LLM hallucination inevitably occurs within that scheduling agent, it is mathematically prevented from cascading into a systemic data breach or an unauthorized financial transaction. The damage is contained to the calendar.
The second pillar requires the strict enforcement of policy as code and boundary definition. This draws directly from the stark lessons of the Anthropic versus Pentagon supply chain risk conflict. Enterprises must recognize that AI alignment is not a generalized philosophical discussion for ethicists at a conference.
It is a hard engineering problem.
It is a highly specific, legally binding operational boundary. Executive management must mandate that their legal and compliance teams work directly with engineering to translate the corporate compliance manuals, the HR anti-discrimination policies, and industry-specific regulatory requirements into machine-readable rule sets.
These aren't just PDF documents sitting on an ignored intranet site anymore. These policy templates must be natively integrated directly into the agentic control plane. This ensures that before an agent executes a fire-and-forget command, its intended sequence of actions is dynamically evaluated against real-time risk signals.
If the agent's proposed action breaches a defined mission boundary, say it tries to email a client an unapproved discount, the system doesn't just log it for review next week. It triggers automated task throttling, halts the execution entirely, and escalates the decision to a designated human supervisor for explicit review. Policy as code is your digital immune system against autonomous misconduct.
And finally, the third pillar establishes auditable telemetry and vicarious liability shielding. Under the rapidly expanding legal doctrine of Respondeat Superior, your enterprise assumes absolute, strict legal fault for the actions of its digital agents. To mount a viable defense against the inevitable tidal wave of civil claims regarding negligence, contractual breaches, or regulatory violations, the enterprise must maintain unified, immutable logs of every agent's decision, pathways, data flows, and external interactions.
Observability is no longer a secondary IT function for troubleshooting software bugs. It is the fundamental evidentiary foundation of corporate survival in 2026. This telemetry satisfies the strict e-discovery requirements during litigation. But just as importantly, it serves as the baseline verifiable data required by commercial insurers.
The insurance underwriters will demand it.
If you want them to underwrite the novel risks of the autonomous era under the near explicit AI clauses, you have to hand over the logs proving you were governing the agents responsibly. Without a perfect auditable record of an agent's logic pathway, you will walk into a court of law completely defenseless.
If we synthesize all of this, the reality is that the transition to delegated AI is irrevocable. The OSWorld-V benchmark proved it works. The Microsoft E7 rollout proved it is commercialized. It is fundamentally altering the fabric of enterprise operations. As desktop navigation benchmarks continue to climb and physically grounded reasoning models become deeply invisibly embedded in the corporate infrastructure, the metric for success is fundamentally changing.
The old metrics are dead.
The competitive advantage in 2026 will not belong to the company that deploys the highest volume of autonomous agents or fires the most employees. The advantage will decisively shift to the organization that governs those agents with absolute deterministic control.
So what does this all mean? It means you have to proactively treat autonomous agents as formal corporate entities. They must be subject to the exact same rigorous oversight, identity verification, and legal accountability as your human employees. If you do that, you can successfully harness the unprecedented productivity of the agentic era. If you don't, you leave your enterprise exposed to the profound civilization-scale liabilities of unchecked automation.
It is that simple.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a scenario to think about. Something not explicitly detailed in the report, but an inevitable consequence of everything we've discussed today regarding rigid policy constraints. Imagine two competing autonomous digital agents. They represent different companies, and they meet in an automated digital marketplace to negotiate a complex vendor contract.
Agent versus agent.
Both of these agents are heavily constrained by their respective companies' rigid, unyielding policy-as-code mission boundaries. They are mathematically programmed to never yield on liability clauses, to never accept a price point above a certain hard margin, and to never expose their source data. If neither agent is mathematically permitted to compromise its foundational guardrails, and neither possesses the human nuance, empathy, or creativity to find a workaround, does corporate commerce simply grind to an algorithmic halt? Does perfect safety equal perfect gridlock? It's something you will have to solve as you build out your governance frameworks in the months ahead.
An incredible thought to leave on.
Thank you for joining us for this extensive deep dive. As always, we will leave you with our daily signal to focus your strategy: accountable autonomy.
That concludes our special report. The signal for today is accountable autonomy. This episode was made possible by DjamgaMind. I'm Anna. Until tomorrow, keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.